diaspora. And we have two very distinguished presenters today that are going to give us really good information on this particular topic. So I'm going to turn it over to my presenters at this time. We have Dr. Johnny Rice.
No, I am not Dr. anything.
Okay, thank you. We have Johnny Rice from the National Congress of Black Women, and also we have ADOTEI, who will also be a presenter on this panel. And I will turn it over to our two panelists to give them introductory presentations about themselves and their background before we get into the topic.
I'll go first. My name is ADOTEI AKWEI. I am the Deputy Director for Advocacy and Government Relations with Amnesty International, which is an international human rights organization started in 1961. My work focuses on advancing the respect and protection of human rights in sub-Saharan Africa, and my focus is the federal government and U.S. foreign policy. I am from Ghana originally and have been living in Washington, D.C. since 1994.
This one here. This one.
I am Johnny Scott Rice. I'm chair of the National Congress of Black Women. I am also Commissioner Rice for the Office of D.C. Serve. I am also the chair of the United Black Front. I am a fourth generation Washingtonian. I live in Southeast Washington. I was educated in D.C. public schools. And I was in the first class, second class. The case was separate but equal. Our schools were not equal, so therefore we integrated to reach that process.
Okay, so the first question that we have today for Johnny is how racial equity is best practice. Could you explain how racial equity is the best practices for our community?
First thing you gotta do is speak to people. That begins racial equity right there. Meet your neighbor. You know, you live in these neighborhoods, you don't speak to each other. Whether they're black, green, blue, or purple. You can go by your next door neighbor, you don't even speak. Make a friend every day. When you get on the subway and you're riding to work in the morning, you feel evil and don't want to go, say good morning. Maybe the person sitting next to you can tell you something that other day. That's how you reach racial equity. You get in communities, you go to church, join groups that reach out to other groups. That's how you get racial equity, because you can learn something from somebody each and every day. As my mother always told us, experience is a dear school and a fool will learn in no other. And how can you not learn? You see people every day. You walking down the street every day. Why can't you say good morning? Say good morning to somebody who might have a problem. They might tell you all their business, and you just might have the answer. When you start to speak, that's all it takes to find out about a person and also find out who you are. Because that person may have some of the same issues going on with them as you have going on with you. I'm not a grandmother, but I'm a great aunt. I have 3 great nephews that have come out of my home. My sister still lives in the house we grew up in Northeast Washington. Our community was called Trinidad. All of a sudden, white people are moving in and now it's called Capitol East. Well, that's not what my mortgage said. That's not what my map for the property that we own say. Don't change my name of our neighborhood to please somebody else who's only going to be here for a minute. They're not going to stay here. Most of them are coming in for a job. They lose their job, they go back to wherever. But at least make them be involved in your communities while they're here. Make them join the community block clubs. My street, Moore Street, the 1400 block. When I moved there in 1949, I was 9 years old. We were the second black family on the street. Thank God we moved next door to the first. We're still friends today. You know who owned that street? The Jews that owned H Street. You know who lived in those houses? The Jews that owned all the buildings on H Street. You know who my friends are? Those same Jews. To this day. So, my dad, born and raised in Georgetown. My mom, born and raised in Foggy Bottom. Didn't look like what it looks like today. Me and my cousins say every day, we don't need to go to Georgetown, because it's not the Georgetown we knew. We have relatives that don't live over there anymore, but they still got friends over there. You gotta think about who you are when you get up each day and what God has in His plan for you. And you do that by getting your butt up. And like me, I'm lazy, I don't get up early anymore. So I don't have to work anymore. I'm retired from DC government, and I love my life because I do now what I want to do, not what I have to do. And when you have that freedom, you're supposed to share that freedom. You share it with everybody you come in contact with. I saw a little couple on the train the other day, brand new baby, 3 months old. I didn't realize it was a live baby. I thought they were just kind of holding a blanket up there. And I heard this, I said, is that a baby? And they said, yeah. I said, what is it? And I knew it was a girl because the baby was in a big blanket. They said, oh girl. I said, what's her name? Malia. I said, okay, so that's the new name after the Obama girls? Ain't nothing wrong with that. Then you can tell who your baby was named for. And I told the young brother, he got on all these glitter tennis shoes and stuff, foot up on the back of the seat. I said, take your foot down. Put it on the floor, not on the back of the seat. Yes, ma'am, he said. I said, okay. When I got off the train, I said to them, God has blessed you with this blessing. Know that it is your responsibility to bring this baby up in a way where she can grow, be exposed, the whole 9 yards. So I'm blessing you to say, may God bless you too. And you come up here with your baby. And the little girl said, thank you, ma'am, thank you, ma'am. That doesn't hurt. I don't know whether they believe in God. I do. You never know what those words are going to do for those 2 young people. And if they will remember this old lady that was on the train that said a prayer for them that didn't even know. That's how you get racial equity. That's how you get people to work with each other, to talk to each other. I get on the subway this morning at Potomac Avenue, white family from Washington, real Washington, the state of Washington. They here because of the baseball team and the football team. You gotta have money to come from Washington. They ain't in Seattle. They way out in the woods. That's what they told me. I've been to Seattle. Little baby, what it is the son and daughter that moved here for a job. And that's what they were explaining to me. They didn't have to talk to me, but I made them talk to me. And they found out that I had been to Seattle, and I hated it because it smelled like coffee. And they found out, they said, you've been to Seattle. That's all you got to do. Open your mouth. Speak to your fellow man and your fellow woman, and you will always see there's something in common. And once you start, and like I say, when they move in my community, you have to knock on their door. Hi, I'm Johnny Rice. I'm chair of our community block club. How long you plan to live here? How many kids do you have? Do you have a job? What can we do? So I'm nosy. I'm a nosy neighbor. I had my house built. I'm gonna be nosy. I ain't going nowhere. I don't know how long you're gonna be here, but I want you to stay for a while. I want you to understand that this neighborhood that I live in, we care about. We clean up the trash behind people who throw trash in our neighborhood. We have a damn school next door to us. I hate that school. It's a charter school. You talk about heathens? We call it the March of the Heathens every day. Just by the way the parents treat their kids. And you can't say nothing to them, because I do. And they'll tell me, mind your business. Call me all kinds of dirty names. I don't care. I go get my dope and I stand out in front of my house, and you ain't gonna let that child run across my grass. If you don't show them, they won't understand. Sometimes it's firm, sometimes it's not. But these young people out here gotta know, somebody cares. These white kids running around smoking weed, falling out in your alleys, like the one on my street, I thought the white boy was dead laying out there in the alley. I called 911. Before they could get there, he done got his high butt up and strolling on down to the front of our house and passes out on the front lawn. These drugs these kids are using is killing them. And it's the vaping. It's the vape. He was out there vaping and all of a sudden he's laying it down. All I could do was call 911 because I was scared. I didn't know whether the white boy was dead or not. But you talking about a white boy laying in the streets in Southeast Washington. What are they going to think? That's not right. They killed him because it's Southeast. All of Southeast is no ghetto. You got good people in Southeast. You got homeowners in Southeast. You got people like me that bought land in Southeast and had their homes built. So I hate when people just say Southeast and expect all badness because it is not. So racial equality, racial equity, now talk to each other. That's the only way you're going to get it. You got to be able to come. I come from Ward 7 to Ward 3, Ward 1. I'm everywhere. Because I worked at the city council. I worked for the first elected chairman that we just buried in Sterling Douglas. I always chose to work for a large number because I get to be all over my city. That's why people know me all over this city. And they know I'm frank. They know I'm honest. They know if they piss me off, I'm going to let them know that. I'm going to let them know if they're doing good, because that's who I am. And see, I can't lie, because I forget to lie. So I tell the truth. Sometimes I hurt people's feelings. I really don't care. Because if I hurt your feelings, you earn that. But I try to let you know why I hurt you. But I'm more than likely to help you to hurt your feelings. And it works. It works for me.
Thank you, Johnny. We appreciate your comments. And now we're going to go to our distinguished colleague from Amnesty International. And we have a question for him. How civil societies were formed in Africa, challenges, and how they differ from human rights organizations, even though they work as a team.
Thank you. Hard act to follow, and I wish you could have gone. I wish you could have gone on, but I'm going to try to handle obviously this is stuff people study and write dissertations about, so please do not take this as an exhaustive kind of explanation. But I think first it's important to sort of look at civil society, of which human rights organizations are just a part. The larger context of what we call civil society is basically people doing for themselves what governments were not doing for them. And governments can't do it all. At no point in anybody's history has a government been able to take care of everybody's needs, because governments, like everybody else, are political and they respond to who has power and who has money. So people organize themselves and they set up organizations to basically try to address critical needs. And the area that I am most familiar with, sub-Saharan Africa, obviously has the history of colonialism and exploitation from the early 1700s, when most of the country was partitioned by the Europeans, and that is where the needs began to generate the creation of what we would call civil society. You had churches who were already beginning to sort of provide services such as schools, such as food and support for people in need, betterment societies. There were organizations that were created out of the faith-based community that were taking on the issue, obviously, of slavery that had preceded that existed. In fact, in some cases, the human rights group that I belong to, Amnesty International, is a direct descendant of the anti-slavery efforts that were involved in King Leopold's Congo, which was run as his own personal plantation at great horrible cost to the people of Congo. But you have institutions that are set up to help people at the local level. And they exist because the colonial powers really were providing minimal government services because their focus was all about wealth extraction. They wanted an educated colonial population to serve the extraction of wealth. They wanted to have peace and stability, so they wanted to have people who were educated, who could follow the rule of law. But betterment and complete empowerment and advancement, that was not in the cards for these colonial powers. And so they had what I would say was a minimalist approach to governance and to providing the social contract that governments are supposed to do for their citizens. Then, as the liberation movements begin to take shape, for example, in South Africa, you had a combination of trade unions, you had a combination of legal agitators, people whose names may not be as well known as Nelson Mandela, but Chief Albert Lutuli from South Africa. These people were involved in trying to start to take on what was increasingly a racist and discriminatory state, and realized that short of being organized and being a voice to question and challenge the policies of either the Afrikaner governments or the national governments, you were not going to see change and improvement in conditions. These people began to mobilize and educate, and I would say serve as a prototype for what we would call civil society today. And it spreads from there. You, for example, where I was born, in Ghana, Nkrumah was a trade unionist, and that's where his organizing capacity and first credentials came from before he joined what would become the Convention People's Party, which was a political party that the British allowed very close to the 1950s. You had the same kind of thing in Liberia and in Sierra Leone. Liberia in particular, there were civil society organizations that were set up to help the repatriation of people that the United States wanted to get rid of back to Africa after the end of slavery. So civil society arises in Africa in different ways to match or to respond to needs that people in those colonies and eventually those countries become need them to. What happens then is that after these countries become independent, the governmental model has to go through the evolution of not being one that is based on colonial extraction of wealth, but one that is to serve the people in the country that they are now governing. And that's unfortunately where we still are today. Many of these countries have governments that are still colonial entities, and that, except that they're not serving a foreign power, they're serving their own personal interests, acquisition of wealth, acquisition of power. This is why you have this reoccurring problem of people who want to be president for life. You have this problem of people who don't want anyone publishing any articles that are critical of them. This is why you have people who are doing investigations about corruption suddenly being arrested for defamation of the sitting president, or of libel, or of harassment. And civil society begins to be seen as a problem because it's A, not loyal to the ruling party, and B, it's asking difficult questions, and they just don't know what to do with them because they're not elected, they're basically chosen, or they appoint themselves to work and serve the general public. My organization was founded in the United Kingdom, and it was created when a lawyer in the United Kingdom was reading a newspaper about the arrest of college students in Lisbon, Portugal. And they were at a bar, these students, they were toasting to freedom. And they got arrested just for toasting to freedom. Now, it's bad enough that you are being arrested for being in a bar, but what could be wrong or dangerous about talking about freedom? Well, they were. And he decided that that really didn't make sense. And so he starts this model of trying to write to those governments to say, hold on, these boys, or A, didn't do anything violent, B, have a right to an opinion, a non-violent opinion, and C, it seems like you're not following what we would commonly accept as due process. Everybody has a right to, before you should be detained. And that's the model of the organization that stayed with us for over 50 years. Writing letters, exposing government malfeasance, and then trying to shame those governments into doing the right thing and releasing people. You start to see us developing a focus on individuals. How do you humanize someone who is thousands of miles away from you and make you want to care about them, make you want to do something about them? Do you want to write a letter or a postcard on their behalf? Do you want to go and do a demonstration? And of course, what are the actual facts? Because governments will always write the narrative the way they want it to be seen. Oh, so-and-so, no, he was a rabble-rouser. Or, you know what, he actually insulted the president. We can't have him insulting the president because that breaks down the rule of law. We painstakingly do the research to find out what actually was the charge, what was the activity, and try to verify it. And that's the way we do our human rights work. Now, right now, these two, as I said, human rights groups are part of civil society. Civil society has grown to include the media. Some of us all, actually, you cannot be in this country without this whole issue of fake news and of the incredibly bad relationship between the current president and any media association with the exception of Fox News. This is not a good thing. Civil society has a legitimate place and a legitimate role to play because governments cannot and are not expected to do everything for their citizens. There's a role for engaged people, and there should be a role because we all have a stake in a functional government as well as in a functional society. But unfortunately, what is happening is a poisoning of attitudes about the media, a poisoning of attitudes about people who protest for the environment, a poisoning of attitude about people who fight for voting rights. You know, in other words, all of the issues that we've been fighting and my parents and others fought in the 1960s, we're having to fight all over again. And that means that civil society is once again going to have to step into a leadership role. And I think this is where we are in sub-Saharan Africa, where the idea of civil society is under question because governments want to remove any kinds of stop or check on their ability to hold on to power.
Thank you very much for your comments. Let's give them a hand. Okay, I'd like to open it up now to the audience. Do you have any questions for our panelists?
Of course, you know I'm going to ask you some questions.
Of course.
Of course.
Especially you. You've been with the National Congress for a while now.
In fact, I was there at the beginning. Shirley Chisholm was my mentor.
Well, I was going to say that. I met you years ago.
Oh my
I used to be
God.
the head of the National Bank Reminal Sharpton as a
Yes,
young
that's
boy.
true.
And we were with the National Congress working with Miss Dorothy Height, who I loved dearly. So that's a real
The only reason I'm
history.
a Delta is because of Dorothy.
Dorothy Height.
She
Oh,
would have killed me if I had gone any other.
anywhere else. Just for a little information, she and I and Dr. Dunbar McLaurin and a couple of others were trying to build the first black bank in Wall Street.
I remember.
And we were working closely to make something happen. But that whole institution, now you've got a great replacement.
Yeah.
I mean, Faye Williams, you couldn't say more about her.
Yep,
She's top shelf.
yep.
You've been at the root of it, you've made a difference. Now, I'm going to talk to you after this because I just got chills listening to you.
Let me just say, I was there in Camden, New Jersey, where we
I remember
put
Captain.
our first board together. And C. Dolores Tucker was our second vice.
Wow.
We had Willie Barrow on there. We had Gloria Toop on there. Ona Weldon from Philadelphia.
All heavyweights.
All heavyweights. And I was so crazy and so young, they just took total advantage of me. And they just made me in their own images.
Well, you're that rich history.
I know,
My
I
goodness.
know.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure you answer this question. You will anyway, I know that. Has the National Congress of Black Women developed a particular program? I'm sorry. develops a particular program for women and children to engage intimately in small business introduction, getting them started at the right age they should be if they're 10, 11, 12, while they're still in school. I have something I want to work with you, and we'll talk about this after the meeting, but that's so important. Our children become more financially literate and creating job opportunities for their parents. Those who have been incarcerated looking for opportunities. I listened to everything you said about those kids running across your yard. I used to have 2 Dobermans at one time.
We did too.
And I love them. Well, that sends a message out that she's no nonsense. And you're going to deal with the issues the way they have to be dealt with. That's the threat of the potential. If you do this, there's a price to pay. And if we don't work together collectively as a people, we've paid a price. And we're still paying a price. But it's got to come from women in leadership, not us and men. And I mean this with respect. Women are the educators of our communities, not us. We've been marginalized so differently than women have exercised their rightful authority. And I think the time is now. But have you done anything at this point to bring that together?
We still, you're talking about our college fatigue.
Yes.
We still have it. The PG County has one. DC chapter partners with Virginia to do a college fatigue. We also do a program that most people don't think about. It's called Happy Periods.
Happy Period.
Happy Periods is for women on the street and women in shelters.
Okay.
Every fourth Sunday of the month, we meet at one of the restaurants on 7th Street, and we'll order all the sanitary needs these women are going to need. See, men don't think like that.
We don't.
But women do.
We don't.
And we're talking about young teenage girls that are in shelters. We're talking about women that are walking the street. They don't have that money. But they know they can come on 7th Street and get a whole month's supply.
Wow.
We think about the whole family. We think about kids in shelters. We worked with the Eastern Star last year for the Christmas drive. They bought these huge knapsack backpacks, really good backpacks. We filled them with gloves, t-shirts, scarves, all the things these kids, because I didn't realize that kids in the system, they move from place to place, carrying their stuff in brown paper
You're
bags.
absolutely correct.
Plastic bags. So we partner with a lot of different organizations to help women and children, because a man can make it pretty much. You can find some woman that's gonna feed you and let you stay at the house. But women don't have that option. We have needs that you can go to corner this. We can't do that.
That's true.
So we have to think about how these mothers are doing with their children out here on the street. And that's where we focus. Each year, my chapter does the Shirley Chisholm Trailblazers Award. And we give the Trailblazers Award to somebody, male or female, that has done something for Washington, D.C. kids. We give scholarships to kids headed off to college. It's not much, but it's enough. They'll buy a couple of books. We do this every year. We've been doing it at the Navy Yard. We had to move it last year because Navy Yard has mold problem and they're going to have to rebuild. So we moved it to Bowling Air Force Base. I keep it in the city. And I make sure that I invite folks to that can't afford to pay for those tickets and get my business friends and my neighbors and my church members to buy a ticket.
Have you had great response from the churches?
Not really.
Well, that has to change.
Not really. I have church members that support me, but not the pastors get up there and talk about it. No, they don't do that.
Well, we can change that.
I hope so. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Wow, I'm thrilled you're here.
Yeah, we
I have a
do.
question for my friend here on the left. And It's about the social contracts between African Americans and Africa. One of the things that we're remiss of is the trade relationships between the two. As African Americans, we have a $2.4 trillion annual disposable income, of which Ms. Rice knows intimately. And we own absolutely nothing in America. I look at all of these thousands and millions of buildings in the District of Columbia, skyscrapers, beautiful developments. Name any 2 buildings owned by an African American. Now that's not right, but that's typical all across the United States. We're here, but we've never been included in the process as we ought to have been. And the only way out to salvage our conditions, mentally, psychologically, physiologically, is our relationship with countries like Ghana and some others where there's a reciprocatorial relationship between the two, that we can cross that bridge in trade, where if you want us to give you our business, you have to work with us. And it doesn't mean that we have to set up shop in Africa where it's volatile in many areas. You have to come to the safest place on this planet, the United States of America. We're safer than anywhere else that you can imagine in the entire globe. Establish businesses with us so we can participate in trade, buy our products. If a country buys exclusively one single item, such as those earrings that Ms. Rice has on, I'm using that hypothetically, that means you only employ a lot of people. And if you send your children to get an education in the United States, and they get a bachelor's, master's, doctorate, whatever it is, or come here for business, once they graduate, they don't have to take jobs just as street sweepers. They get paid good money today. Years ago they didn't, as we know. But they have a better opportunity so they can take care of their families and grow their families the way others do. So we're looking for that opportunity, and it can only happen if Africa commits to working with African Americans. This doesn't mean they exclude white America or anybody else. It just means that there's a priority. You've prioritized your relationships and extended it to us directly. We can have all of the social programs, but we don't have control of those resources. Something is wrong, that our employment rates are what they are, and poverty is guaranteed to the black community. Absolutely guaranteed. The only thing in America that's guaranteed, second, we know death is at any opportune time, depending on when our time is up. But we need that reciprocatorial relationship. Can you speak to that? Social contract.
The social contract, I think you're talking about a couple of different aspects of what you could call a social contract, and being creative, getting rid of protectionist legislation for their economies, cleaning up shop and cleaning up corruption issues, because capital flight from sub-Saharan Africa is astronomical. They are losing money left, right, and center because of both exploitative multinational corporations and Western economies, but also because of capacity issues in those countries. In other words, you shouldn't be negotiating contracts that are not in the best interest of the country.
Absolutely.
But the other issue that you're talking about, which is the social contract, is the interpersonal relationship building that has to happen between Africans and African American entrepreneurs, and I think that is coming along, but not fast enough. You know, it definitely could. You know, you hear about initiatives. I think the last one that really caught my attention was the news that the former president was doing something with the NBA in Africa, and I said, okay, that's big. It made the news, but I don't know what it's going to mean in terms of jobs and wealth, but at least it was initiatives showing that there's an opportunity there. If African governments can meet it, then everybody can benefit from it. So there's definitely that kind of dialogue, which my colleague spoke. we need to talk to each other, and that doesn't happen.
Yes.
That's not happening the way it should. What's happening right now as we're sitting here is that you're seeing Chinese state-run businesses jumping in and capitalizing on the open space, to the detriment, I would argue, of some of the African populations and the African governments who are not negotiating properly. That's not China's fault. They're doing it in their self-interest, but that's Africa's fault of not looking at the fine lines of what they're signing. But I do think you're right. The social contract of African governments is, you know, it's funny. There was a panel at the the Brain Trust where they asked people to give the African Union a scorecard, and I said incomplete, as opposed to an F or an A. I said it's a process, you know, but we definitely need to get our game together on the continental side, and we also need to engage with entrepreneurs here, and I think that can happen.
Thank you very much.
One more real quick. Have either of you seen Little Saigon in Virginia?
Yes.
Shopping center,
I have.
all
I used to live in Dale City.
all Asian.
Yes.
That's right.
Even if they don't speak the same language and can't speak to each other, they have one single uniting factor, that they're Asian.
That's right.
Yeah.
And no one else is in there in ownership of businesses,
That's
even
right.
if they can't speak the same language.
That's right.
And they're flourishing. But those prototypes are what we need to see examples of in order to teach or train us in how to work collectively together, monetarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's basically what happened in U Street. U Street was black
At one time.
at one time. Yes, the buildings were owned by Jews. Most of the blacks did not own the property, but they'd been there as business owners for years. With gentrification, well, we got apartments over top of the buildings. They're so small, they can't turn around in them, but they want to live in the inner city. What's going to happen to those apartments when they start having babies? They can't have them in there. They're going to the suburbs. What's going to happen to those buildings? They're going to become public housing all over again. Or they're going to tear them down. So it's always a problem of keeping people in place instead of displacing them, running them out of the city to Prince George's County, because that's about the only county that's welcoming to us. So you gotta think about it. We ain't running to Montgomery County.
They're watching now.
They want us. You think they want us?
Yes.
They don't.
Yes.
No, they accept Africans because they think you all are more intelligent than we are.
In Montgomery County, we have a racial equity and social justice initiative
You
that
need
the
it.
entire county is involved in.
You need it. And when you think about all the way up there to where the mountains of Maryland, you ain't got too many houses up in there.
If I might add to what you said, 355, the entire route going up, with all those hundreds and thousands of businesses, only 2 black businesses are on 355. They're not including us, and you're both speaking to a truth.
Yeah.
And efforts are being made, but not greatly enough. They're holding on to that power at the exclusion of the black community.
Exactly.
I see another question in the back, so please, if you share that with us.
Is directed at where are we going to find the moral leadership for some of the things that we need to do to not miss rice anymore for the neighborhoods. But how do you do that if you have organizations like the State Department's cutting back 45 to 25% on their human rights program, which affects worker rights, human rights, and these other kind of things. And if you don't have that kind of direction advancing these kind of programs, you don't have the kind of push from unions and so forth, we're not going to have that. And I'm going to pick on my British colleague, and then you have America first, Britain first, and the rest of the world then has to step forward and move forward with these kind of programs, except for people like all of you saying, hey, we need some other. So we're going to, and then we don't have the resources. You know, my church is a big church, but it doesn't have the money of the U.S. government. I don't care how smart you are, the schools don't have the resources of the British government or the Congolese government to advance these kind of things. And where are you going to get that kind of prep? And fortunately, the African Union has stepped up, you know, but they don't have the money as the European Union.
I think we as a community, and I'm speaking collective, both Africans in the United States and Africans in Africa, have an amazing flaw in that we don't retell history often enough of what our parents and forefathers went through to get to where we are today. We are literally, I'm here and I'm now, and I need to get ahead today, tomorrow, and the next thing, as opposed to what did it take for me to get to where I am? And there's an erosion in the commitment to bettering for the whole, as opposed to just for me, my family, and my immediate community. And I think that that's a real problem. I see people getting ready to talk about the fall of the Berlin Wall, you know, which at the end of this year, but I don't hear people talking about the end of apartheid. That's terrible. That was one of the most important moral victories of good over evil that any of us will read in history books, or luckily have been a part of. So retelling that history to high school, to college, middle school, and basically saying this history is no less important or valid, because that's where you start to see people pick up on values of sacrifice and service. And it was striking to hear the two officers mention that today, that their job is to serve. And I think that is an incredibly powerful value that we need to rekindle, especially with the current occupant of the White House and Congress not doing what it's supposed to do. I think that, you know, one of the things in my job is that I do get to meet college students. You know, they want to talk about human rights work. Admittedly, it's a selective set of people who want to work on foreign policy, they want to work on rights. They're already of this mindset, but I meet them and I think, this is great. This is the next generation. And I listen to them and they're already further ahead than I was when I was at their age. They've got a path and they've got objectives. So there's capacity there. It's just that we need to figure out, for want of a more appropriate word, how to make it sexy and how to make it vital. And that's nothing we can't do. You know, we can frame and message in a way that inspires and empowers people. We just need to do it.
Make it sexy.
You know,
and they will gravitate to
They
it.
sure will.
you know,
They sure will.
and you said the final thing is this your issue of resources. It's absolutely true. A lot of the organization, the DC-based groups in Africa have shrunk. You know, it's a very weak constituency right now, and it's unfortunate because it's the perfect storm of a withdrawal by the United States in Africa, not to mention an abdication of any kind of moral leadership, let alone compliance with the sense of being a member of a global community. All of that is happening just as I've mentioned. Other parts of the world are jumping in to make partnerships, not on the bet, you know, partnerships from China, partnerships from Russia, partnerships from Turkey. All of that is happening. And all of it is happening in ways that don't necessarily promote the values that we're discussing today. So we need to figure out how to get people to invest again. I'll end on a positive note. You know, the anti-apartheid movement succeeded without major funding. You know, it was lots of small grassroots organizations, individual elected officials going out there and protesting, you know, and getting arrested. You know, it wasn't funded. It was grit and determination and people going around to speak at churches and
Heart and soul.
Heart and soul. It really was. And so it can be done once. It can be done again.
Thank you, Johnny. Would you like to add?
Well, like I said, we gotta take care of each other, and that includes all races. Especially since everybody's coming here to the United States thinking this is the land of freedom. It ain't. Some of us ain't doing so good. But we need to talk to our African brothers and sisters. Because some of y'all come here and you act like you're better than us. So, especially the sisters. They come here, nose up. I'm better than you because I am really African. Half of you ain't no more blacker than I am. You just born in another country.
Say it.
So that offends. And that's why you don't have these good relationships. And it's women. It's mostly women who do that to each other. And whether we want to realize that or not, it is a true thing. I've confronted it. I've had to deal with it. The brothers get here and they want to get with the American black woman or a white woman. So we all killing each other. We all are disrespecting each other, and we are all God's children. No matter where we came from, we came out, if it came through a rape, if it came through love, if it came through however God gave us to our parents, there was a reason for that. And we have to accept that. I see African sisters that have on some of the prettiest scarves and their headdress and all of that. And I got to stop them sisters and tell them how bad they are. And they'll grin at me like, you know, you're a rarity. What do you mean? Nobody ever says this but my people. Well, I'm your people. You're looking good, girl. That's how you make friends. That's how you learn each other's cultures. That's how you bring it around to where we all are today, here in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, living as next door neighbors, working together. You teach me, I teach you. And that's how we can come together and make stuff work. Because all of our needs are the same. We want decent schools, we want decent police, we want decent communities, and we want friends. So what else can you do? You're right here together. Work it together. Invite me to your house. Teach me about your background. I can teach you about mine, but I sure can't teach you about yours. My jeweler is from Senegal. I love him because he is a skilled brother. I got so mad when he went back home. I screamed. I called him. I said, Mustafa, when you got? No, Johnny Rice. I just got married. I'm making babies. Can't get you no more. I wanted to kill him. But he was a good brother. So I can just tell you, all we got to do is start talking to each other and not getting offended. But be truthful. That's all I can tell you.
All right, thank you very much. One other question I see is coming up.
Yeah, I'm just pleased that you made that African American woman who don't you. It's a two-way street, really. It takes two to tango. So, but in the end analysis, I'm quite optimistic because there has been many changes over many years. I think it comes with awareness and knowledge of each other, and the more, like I think Dr. Blank said about trade and cultural relationships, there's a lot of intermarriages, and it's not just, you know, as some people always say, you can take the African from you know, an African can leave Africa, but you can't take the African from the African.
Exactly.
So it's not a matter of whether you're African American or African. After all, we've come a long way where there was a time that, remember James Brown and Black and Proud?
Sure.
Yeah.
Right now, African Americans are called African Americans, but there was a time they were called Black Americans. So we've come a long way. But in the end analysis, I think it's going to be about like-minded people who respect the dignity of the African man and the African woman. Whether they're black, pink, purple, it's probably not going to matter in the end. After all, we had a mixed-race black president
Yeah.
in the US. He had a white parent, you know, and a Kenyan parent.
Yeah. And they had made friends with the people when they came to do the selling of the tobacco. One day, the black people that lived there told them, you ain't gotta go back. We got somewhere to hide you. That's how my family got here. That's what I was told. And that's why my father and his brothers and sisters, cousins, were all born in Georgetown. My mother's family, my grandma said, that they came out of Virginia on a farm in Virginia. And they got here basically the same way. They ran away. You could not get my Aunt Vi to go across the railroad line. I didn't know how close, she had no idea how close she was to D.C. in Clinton. And she never wanted to know. Because in her mind, it was a long way away, and it was a slave plantation. Their name was Palmer. They changed, no, the name was Farmer, and they changed it to Palmer. They never went across the line once they got here.
So do you think that the ADOS group of people should have special treatment separate from the Africans who are not? Like Obama is not an ADOS. President Obama was not ADOS.
Okay.
So do you agree with
What reparations can they give us? What they gonna give us?
others?
What do we have? What do they have? Money's not gonna do it. If they're talking about monetary, it's not gonna do it. It's too many of us.
Employment,
Employment, housing, education, yes.
So it should be a special class, is what you're saying,
But I'm not sure that it should be a special class.
separate from Africans.
I don't think it should be separate from Africans. Africans are the soil. Somebody came from Africa to get the rest of us here. So I know my father's grandmother was Jamaican. And I know she somehow got out of Jamaica and married a black man, my grandfather, who was in the Navy. And so, don't ask me how he got here. I know that he was what they called a wardroom cook on a ship back in World War I, World War II. I know he's laying over there with ceremony in Arlington Cemetery, what I still call Arlington Cemetery. And all of the men in my family were in the military, and they either dead over there or dead at the one down there in Quantico. So they used the military as a way to get ahead. So I really don't know.